Oh, yes, Linda, I almost forgot that we are, of course, moving on with our program item on autonomous driving in rural areas. So we'll be talking about city buses, coaches, but you will now take us by the hand and travel to rather rural areas. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, Johanna. We will be going to the countryside now. It's great to see that the chairs have been filled. People seem to have arrived, even those who went to the future night yesterday. We will be talking about the rural areas now and how new mobility concepts can actually be a key factor for the transition here, the traffic transition. So how do we deal with the last mile? Are there any other business models that could help, or is it just a question of supplying basic services? And what kind of vehicle concepts will be around in the future? And I'm very much looking forward to the support by Uhlmann, CEO by Motor AI, a Berlin software company that, among other things, also has developed a software for a level 4 autonomous driving. AI has been, of course, the hot topic for many years, but he's been working on this for 10 years, neural networks and AI, and he's here with us. So give him a big hand, Roy. Thank you very much for being here with us. And feel free to take a seat already. Then we've got Marvin here, Senior Accountant Executive from Here Technologies. This is a map provider also for autonomous driving. Yes, of course, an applause for him too. And I haven't even said what you're doing, and you're getting an applause already. So he has his master in vehicle technologies, focusing on digital technologies, among others, with Daimler Trucks. He developed the digital ecosystem, focusing on cooperations as well. And now he is working with Here in the area of location data. And what I find is particularly interesting, he's holding 19 patents for the bus. I'm really looking forward to find out whether the one is actually referring to autonomous driving as well. Thomas Dreves is the head of autonomous driving at DB Regio. And it's great to have you here. Okay. He is an engineer for economics. He's been working with the Deutsche Bahn, the railway, since for 16 years. For 13 years, he's been working in the field of autonomous driving. But since December 23, he's the head of autonomous driving for DB Regio road traffic. I'm looking forward to your input. And, of course, a great hand for you as well. Thank you. And as the last participant, we have Tamy, Sass, Chief Revenue Officer at goUrban, a Vienna startup focusing on shared mobility. She is from the tourism industry originally. In 2016, she moved over to the mobility sector, and there she also helped Wunder Mobility in their expansion, and now she is CRO with goUrban, and I'm happy to welcome you here. Great to have you here. Nice to meet you. Okay, and if you've paid attention and if you've looked into the program, Katrin Kintröller is missing. You might have spotted that. That has something to do with the airspace above Norway being closed, and she can't come. But she extends her best wishes. It's a pity that she's not here, but we still have a lot of expertise here on stage, and I'm looking forward to the discussion with you. And if you've paid attention, there's still an empty chair. That one's not for Katrin. We want to have a fishbowl discussion. That's going to be the hot seat, and you will be invited to join in the discussion whenever you want. We'll have a brief introduction, and then you can feel invited to join us in our discussion, to share your impressions on autonomous driving in the rural areas. So this is your chair. Feel free to join us on stage. Okay, let's get started with our round. It's great to have all of you here. Let's take a look at how we deal with autonomous driving in rural areas in the countryside. Let's just take first a look at the status quo. What's the current positioning? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? Thomas, you can get started, please. At the last Bus to Bus 2 years ago, DB Regio here on stage actually sketched their idea of a ramp-up for autonomous driving. You said that you wanted to have 6,000 autonomous vehicles across Germany until 2030. Are you well underway, or are you nervous? No, I'm not yet nervous. First of all, hi to everyone. I'm not really nervous yet because 2030, that's a long way off. No, but we are working on it, and we're also working on numbers that, go in that direction that you just mentioned. But we're starting with our pilot transport level 4. Kira is the name of the project, together with the federal level and in the Rhine-Main area with the traffic and transport associations there, with the colleagues from Darmstadt and from Offenbach. We'll be carrying out this project for the first level for transport on the road, and we'll go for a proof of concept first. So the first step is to show that the technology that we're using, with the help of Mobileye, that we can actually use it and that it can be used in regular operations, in shift operations. That's the first step. And with that, we are really laying the foundation, and based on that, we will have additional vehicles that will also be pilot vehicles. And afterwards, we will have regular series, vehicles, Volon, Schaeffler. We already set up our partnerships with them. And together with them, we want to make sure that we get these vehicles onto the road. Well, sounds like a good roadmap. Sounds like you've got a sound plan. Are there any challenges you still have to contend with, or are you saying, well, no, things are running smoothly? Well, of course, there are a few challenges in the market. If you take a look at the whole picture, then the ramp-up costs, in the market are very high. So very expensive vehicles because the vehicles are only produced in smaller batches. We've got high process costs because the processes have not yet been fully reviewed. Then there are also regulatory costs because, there are costs that are incurred by a relatively high safety standard. So we need to have highly professional and experienced technicians, highly skilled, specialized technicians, and that means that in the processes, once we make some progress, these costs may be reduced in the future. On the other hand, there is the challenge that we've got these, initial costs, in order to get the data from certain regions, upload the data, and process the data. So this is actually a very high cost base. In total, we are still a lot more expensive than traditional forms and modes of transport with the drivers. And the challenge now is, that the municipalities cannot afford that right now because of the budgetary situation. With all the crises we're confronted with, we have less and less money in the public purse. So we need a new kind of approach. That means we need strong support in order to be able to get many different vehicles from many different providers out there onto the street. The question is how to do that. In the past, we could see that we, had the first wave of level 3, for example, and we basically pursued an approach where we put just one vehicle in front of every city hall or town hall, But this phase might have been good when it comes to, getting people acquainted with the technology, introducing the technology. But now we're entering into a different phase. We now have to develop the market. We have to start scaling up. Now we have mature technologies for the market, and that means we need higher volumes, also traffic and transport volumes, but also numbers of vehicles. But that cannot be done across the whole country because no one can afford that. So we need model regions. And it still is the question how to finance that in those model regions. So we need governmental support. And then you would have, certain test operations where you can show, okay, the technology is working. We have use cases for city or urban situations and rural scenarios. And then the manufacturers have planning security, can ramp up the production capacities, then the vehicle prices go down. You can test and review the whole operation. So that means the prices and the costs would go down, and then you could later scale it up to the whole of the Federal Republic. And that is exactly the question, right now. How do we get these model regions to join us? Thank you.
Now, what about you? You developed a software for level 4. We were just talking about level 3, but level 4, you are one step further. Do you work in model regions? What is your perception? What are the challenges and what are the potential solutions? Now, first you have to see that the market is tremendously fragmented. We have the OEMs, then we have the systems manufacturers, we have a lot of infrastructure, and everything creates a lot of costs. Everybody wants to make money, which is understandable, but we look at the market from a different vantage point. We say, how can we get public transport to become more available and more efficient? Now, that's the basic question. We are manufacturers of the autonomous system. We have the map technology as well. So we try to massively reduce the costs that were just mentioned and reduce and integrate the vehicle in a way that we no longer need 4.5 bus drivers to operate a vehicle for 24 hours, 24/7, but to actually reduce the cost relevance of the vehicle per se, to reduce the personnel numbers in a way that it immediately becomes economically feasible. That's our idea to prove this in various regions. We don't think we can always do this with the big volumes. We have to prove it with the small volumes. Big volumes always become more affordable anyway. Okay, so the one challenge is to reduce costs, to start somewhere, to test it. And Marvin, what about you? Your map providers for autonomous driving. Analog? No, autonomous. Autonomous. Now, what's the biggest challenge for you? What are you working on, and what are you discussing? Now, that's a good question. As you said, we develop the maps that are being used for autonomous driving. Mercedes, BMW, these two vehicle types use our highly accurate maps. This is a very important part of autonomous vehicles, and a lot of partners are involved here. Thomas already mentioned some. It is important to look at what's happening inside of the vehicle, sensorically, actorically, and sensor AI plays a very important role here. And irrespective of how well the eyes, the sensors of the vehicle work, it always thinks on the basis of the map. It knows where to drive, where a potential problem will occur because of a highly accurate map. So this is a very complex aspect when it comes to autonomous driving, and buses have a lot of different tasks to fulfill. And I think in general we're on a good path. We notice that there are certain aspects that are becoming ever more dominant in autonomous driving. And does that answer your question? Well, yes, to a certain extent. I just wanted to take stock of where we are. But, I mean, asking the three of you, I'd like to take Tamy into the discussion as well. But the question to the three of you, everything needs to be scaled up now. It needs to be brought onto the road. But do you see additional challenges with a view to what we need? Do we need a mindset shift? Do passengers already feel at ease in a vehicle where they know that there's no human being driving it anymore? Do we need more regulation? Or, I mean, I could imagine that there are more challenges. There's one more aspect that I'd like to mention, and that's passengers. Whenever we do test rides, they say, this is very boring. But this is exactly what it should be. If it were overly exciting, we'd be doing something wrong. So I think there is an acceptance level as soon as you've been on an autonomous bus drive. And you also have to add, the bus is predestined for autonomous driving, because when you're a passenger on a bus, you're not the driver anyway. In a private vehicle, you need to convince people a lot more. You need to build up trust, etc. But how much trust do we put into a bus driver? Well, quite a lot, unless they make repeated mistakes, then the level of trust goes down. Now, at the end of the day, what you need is good service. The product experience needs to be good for the customer. It's not just the driving experience, it's also the way they feel during the bus ride, what happens when there are problems. You need inside monitoring systems where the customer can enter into contact with a steward or somebody if there's a problem, if there is a question. And at the end of the day, there's a service that's necessary in addition to the mere driving aspect. You need systems that collect the vehicle data. If you take out the driver, you don't know about the tire pressure, the charging status, the whatever it is, but you need systems that evaluate that data. And then you have a systems environment, the ride care, the passenger care, the operating systems that collect the vehicle data, and the autonomously driving vehicle doesn't know where to go, so there needs to be somebody to tell the vehicle where to go to. Usually those are apps in private vehicles where customers enter where to go to in a navigation system, but there are also moments where there's no customer in the vehicle, and then the vehicle also needs to be occupied. And the same applies to the bus. The bus needs to have a route. Sometimes there are construction sites or stops are blocked, and all of this needs to be in a system and needs to be communicated to the autonomously driving vehicle. So this entire system landscape needs to be interconnected. At DB, we started very early on, and since 2017, we've had Yoki as a subsidiary, and they do the communication from on demand and now do it in general bus line transportation, and they are also the control platform for all of the other integration aspects, so you can manage the entire system. And that's what we need to develop further. We need additional partners, we need additional players, and we did it for the players that we're working with on this project, but we want to gradually include more providers on that platform. So funding, platform connectivity, scalability, people are already convinced or think that it's boring, which is a good sign. So Tamy, now you have the shared mobility focus, and you have a lot of experience on how to roll this out in the countryside. Now, what's the current state of affairs? What are the challenges? From your point of view, are there synergy effects? Can you already say, yes, these are things that we've tried and can help with?
I think that there are many learnings that we had from the shared mobility road that the autonomous sector is doing right in a sense. So something that happened with us was trying to flow the streets with shared mobility because VC monies were coming strongly and they needed to grow to keep getting it. But the thing that I see that AVs are doing that we will avoid this kind of situation that we have today of being blocked by the society, by government, and so, is that they are partnering with cities, which I think that it's a great way to go, while at the same time can be a little bit slow here in Europe, because if we compare to what's happening in China and in the United States, they have somehow a much more open conversation with these operators, including Autonomes, which I think that they can speak up a little bit more about afterwards. From my side would be really about the using the opportunity that we have with shared mobility to avoid doing the same mistakes, while at the same time getting a little bit of pressure, putting a little bit of pressure in the sense that they can go to the same direction that more innovative markets are going, to try to make Europe move forward in this sense. I think that it's really about trying to be more innovative and pushing harder for the regulations to happen. Because in the case of shared mobility, for example, what we see is that we try to talk to cities. Sometimes we talk for 3 years to implement a project, and then after 3 years the mayor changes or someone that is responsible for the area changes, and then everything starts from the beginning onwards. And it would be a shame if we would be left behind in Europe like EVs were, that took some years to accelerate and get to the position that the US and China were, for example.
Also Pace, und wir müssen also Zeit und Schnelligkeit vor allem.
Okay, so speed, pace. Now, again, we have an empty chair here. It doesn't need to stay empty. If you want to join us and be involved in the discussion, this is an invitation. We'd be glad, unless otherwise we'll stay among us. Among ourselves. So we need more speed. You said if after 3 years the mayor changes, we don't need to be in a situation where we start anew. That's important. Now, if we go back into the countryside, I am from the countryside myself. I live in the countryside, and this is a little bit of a mindset issue. You can easily, pick up people, achieve a lot through local politics. So let's look at the countryside. What is your experience in the countryside? Do you encounter open doors there when you say we'd like to do a pilot project or we want to equip a bus, or is it more of a convincing job that you need to do? Well, money always is a problem. The budgets are tight, and when we're talking about projects that are being subsidized, you always have to cover your own share, and where does that money come from is always an issue. But whenever we talk to local councillors, when we talk to the managing directors of public transport companies, it's not so much about being innovative, it's always about solving a solution. There's the student buses in elementary school closed, and you need to pick up 4 students in a 20-kilometer range. How do you do that? You have certain regions that you need to include. So you can always look at things on a use case basis. I had the experience once that I was in an appointment where the managing director of the company knew the people by name who they needed to pick up. So he was familiar with the problem. He could name the problem, and that shows you how necessary and important it is. And even though there's a lot of innovation, at the moment it's an innovation, but it's going to become normal at some point rather faster than later. We're currently dealing with the iPhone moment. It's the day before we're all going to do it, and it becomes natural. But the future is going to be solving problems, including connecting the countryside, and behind that there are a lot of other problems. Anybody else who would like to add anything? Yes, I think we have the biggest mobility need in the countryside. In the cities, if you look at Berlin, for example, we basically have a good mass transport offer. I live in the countryside myself. When I want to go to the neighboring village to play table tennis, or when I was a kid, it was always my parents who took me there. So without them, it doesn't work. Very often, there are only school buses that go somewhere 3 times a day. But in general, the older people get, and people do get older in the countryside, they can no longer participate in society if they're not mobile. And for that, you always need somebody who takes you there, a family member. Time is the scarcest resource that we have, so things are becoming increasingly difficult. So in the countryside, we have to ensure that these services of general interest are provided, that there is a transport transformation. And the problem that we see is we already have a scarcity of drivers. This is going to become even more difficult in the years to come. And if we want to succeed in making services available in the countryside that are really worth talking about, we need autonomous driving. And at the end of the day, the right approach would be to say we need something like a mobility guarantee. Hamburg was piloting this. They said every 5 minutes there needs to be an available offer. You cannot really do this in the countryside or in smaller cities. There it would be too much, too expensive, and not needs-based. In cities, when you talk about 15 minutes, then you might be able to talk about 30 minutes in the countryside, and that would already be a considerable improvement over what you have today, and we need to get there. And you can only do this with autonomous driving. Otherwise, it'll be too expensive, and consequently, we don't have the drivers. But now, you mentioned every 30 minutes. This still sounds very much like regular bus lines. You go to a bus stop, and every half hour there's a bus. This is an improvement, but is it also possible to move away from this completely and really have an on-demand service? And whenever I need a bus, it'll come, or if there are intelligent services and the bus registers that there are 3 people who want to go in the same direction, it'll send an autonomous shuttle, or will we stick to bus lines? Well, as it usually is in life, you need to have a mix. In order to have these offers, these types of mobility guarantees, you need a mix of services. Integrated mobility needs to be based on 3 pillars. The first is for the big volumes trains, regional trains. And then second, between smaller cities, you need to have main axes, and that is all covered by bus lines. And high frequencies, and above that, on-demand regional transport. And that mix allows you to, cover the entire region, and you need to have the 30-minute times and a maximum of 200 meters walk to the bus stop. If you can succeed in that, you have a good coverage. Now, we talked about this behind stage, Tamy, the last mile. That's always the big problem, especially in the countryside. That's where people, need to use the bicycle because they don't necessarily have e-scooters or things like that. So shared mobility is a great possibility there to really cover the entire last mile.
I think that in terms of mobility, we all need to work with an ecosystem. Yeah, I think that there are different user cases, there are different people moving in different ways, and in the rural areas, especially as the frequency of transportation is not that high. I know I lived in a rural area which on Sundays, for example, I cannot even take the bus. We need to have alternatives, yeah? Shared mobility is an alternative to be part of this ecosystem as a way to support on-demand autonomous buses, for example, because there is this last mile. We will not get in a point that we will have autonomous buses in every single street like we don't have even with regular drivers today. So it's an opportunity that we have to attend anyone living in rural areas by supporting each other and complementing this ecosystem. Sure.
Und nimmst du wahr, dass gerade auch das Thema Shared Mobility?
Are you noticing that people in the rural countryside are open to these shared mobility ideas? Do they say great, or do you need to convince them?
Can you maybe...
Sorry. In the rural areas, are people open for shared mobility, or do you need to convince them?
You would be surprised because in rural areas there are many hidden mobility champions. So operators, while so many struggle to reach profitability, they are there profitable since day one because they have stations, and these people not necessarily they need to have a car, but they see, as usually they are smaller cities, they know where to find the vehicles that they are looking for. Okay. So I do see that as a huge opportunity also for cities to save with costs instead of having to increase the number of vehicles of rides available, bus rides available. Maybe when there are not that many people to take them, they can have this mix of like keeping the every 30 minutes bus running while at the same time having alternatives if they need to move and they have no way to go. They have no alternative to move from A to B, for example.
Okay. Und ich stelle mir auch noch dazu vor, auf dem Land.
And I would also imagine if you know each other in the countryside, it's also nice to ride together and talk a little bit. But by the way, this is a very nice and comfortable chair. We don't bite. If you want to join us, you are really welcome. We're happy about insights from the audience. I'd like to talk about cooperation. But if there's anything else that you are interested in, join us. Oh, somebody is approaching. So nice. Thank you. Welcome. Now, I'm not going to continue. I'm giving the floor to you. Now, can you tell us who you are? What do you think? Do you have a question? Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Nicolas von Stachelberg. I work for Scania Growth Capital. We are a 200 million euro venture fund. We invest starting 3 million, 5 million is the sweet spot. And my question refers to tariffs, i.e. prices. We hope that after an introductory phase, the costs for operators will go down when they employ autonomous vehicles. And my question focuses on the German context. A lot of people in the country say the Deutschland ticket is a great thing, but I don't even know how to get to the train station. So we have a lot of people from industry here. So my question is, what about the prices? Should that be covered by the Deutschland ticket so that you can achieve more equality between the urban and rural spaces? Who would like to go first? Thomas. Well, basically, the problem is if you put that on top, it's too much, you can't pay for it. If the federal government were to pay for it, it's too much money. But we have a lot of money. We already have a mobility system. Everybody is driving. Everybody is more and more mobile. Not everybody owns a private vehicle. A lot of the private vehicles are sitting around in the countryside. So the money that we're spending for mobility is actually being parked on streets and makes the streets ugly. So if we provide a good offer, the question is, people would tend to sell their second or third vehicle, especially in the countryside. People have 3 to 4 cars per family, and that would save a lot of money. And this money could then be used for monthly tickets or for a per ride payment. You have to think in a comprehensive way. The mobility system needs to be looked at comprehensively. We have to set ourselves a goal in Germany. We have to ask ourselves, how do we want the mobility system of the future to look like? All of the combustion engine vehicles are being replaced by e-vehicles, but that doesn't make that much sense from a societal point of view, nor does it make sense from an economic resource point of view. So what we need at the end of the day is a new goal when it comes to mobility, and we need to think about how this can look like. That would be my answer. Okay, anybody like to add anything? Well, let me just briefly add, I absolutely subscribe to this, but usually it's being said a car is sitting around for 23 hours per day. Why are we willing to pay for it? We're paying for availability. So what we need to do is switch availability from a privately owned vehicle to other vehicles that are maybe mass transport vehicles, and then people are again willing to pay for availability. Okay, thank you. Feel free to stay with us. And I have a follow-up question. It is my impression that sometimes when you travel in the countryside, you see a big bus in front of you, occupied by 2 people, one driving, one as a passenger. Coming back to the costs, I cannot imagine that this is remotely profitable if you have a 14 or 12 meter long bus traveling across the countryside and you're transporting only a few people. I do understand that at certain points during the day the bus would be full, and then it's probably the best vehicle. But if you think on a system level, you can get a lot more flexible in the systems and drive with smaller vehicles. So from a cost point of view, I'd like to understand, what will this system development look like? Will probably work with smaller vehicles that can be used more flexibly instead of bigger vehicles. What's your point of view on that?
I think that in a time where everyone is trying to go to a direction in which we decrease the number of vehicles, I don't see how increasing the number of smaller ones would fit within that. But I totally agree with you. I think that in situations when it's clear that the demand's not there, using smaller vehicles makes total sense. And I think that that's somehow the direction that I wouldn't say Moya, because Moya doesn't have a defined route, but I would say that a vehicle like Moya doing maybe the work that buses are doing today, where there is no demand, and trying to analyze when the demand increased to offer maybe more vehicles or use a second type of vehicle, a bigger one, that could definitely make sense, yeah.
Ja, also im Grunde ist
the need of vehicle sizes can be derived from the real-life demand of people, and it's correct what you're saying. Today, the systems are focused on peaks. The school bus is full in the morning, and over the rest of the day, it's not that full because the system isn't attractive enough to fill it up with many people. So at the end of the day, if we move towards a new system with more shared public mobility, we need smaller vehicles, people movers, for example. We're currently getting these types of vehicles, and that will be the next step. So calculate a system as a goal based on the exact movement data and the exact demand of people, and then gradually you set up a system that gets you there. That's interesting. At the end of the day, we always come back to the issue of cooperation. At the end of the day, this is what we always talk about. We have to cooperate with different players so that we can, read the data in an effective way. How big should the vehicle be? At what point? Moya was just mentioned. I'd like to, spend the last 3 minutes on that very issue. How can we succeed in doing that? Whether it's the question of when are the buses full, when are they not full, financing, how do we get autonomous driving onto the road in the first place in the countryside? So let me ask you again, as an expert for digital ecosystems. First question, do you have the feeling that the countryside is doing well? Do we already have a good ecosystem? And second question, if not, what is needed? Now, I don't want to wear the current hat. I used to work for Daimler Bus for 4.5 years and was responsible for partnerships there, so I'd like to wear that hat now. So let me give you the answer. It is more difficult in the rural area. A lot of things follow a good business case. That was why I was quite hesitant. I'm from Berlin, and I can say we solved the situation here in the city. In Berlin, you have very good mobility offers, and the vehicle sizes are different. You can get here by private car, by train, by bus, or with an e-scooter. When I parked my e-vehicle right here, I saw somebody with a scooter, somebody who arrived by bus, and I arrived by car. So why is it easier in Berlin? Because it's a good business case. We have a lot of people. We have a complex mobility offer. The BVG is a very innovative company that is trying to solve the problems, and you cannot project this solution one-to-one into the rural areas. It wouldn't be appropriate. The same complexity wouldn't be the right fit for the countryside. But in general, I'm on your page. If the school bus is driving across the country roads in a too big vehicle all day long, then one of the players is acting wrong. But I also saw many players doing this in a very intelligent way. So many of those school transport solutions end at 9 or 10 a.m. and restart at 2 or 3 when students go back home, and they switch to smaller vehicles in between. I lived in Ulm in the countryside for a while, and they did exactly that. So I think we're on the right path, and it's always easy when you have a good business case. If the business case is more difficult because the region is very small, i.e. Scalability to different vehicle sizes becoming more difficult, then it's more difficult for the region to solve it. So that might not be the answer that's the most optimistic, but we do see that the business case is becoming more attractive for the countryside because people are willing to pay for it. And I am willing to pay for it if I have a very nice fitting offer. If the e-scooter gets me to the train station, the bus station, or wherever my vehicle is located, then I'm happy and then I'm able and willing to pay for it.
Well, that's probably exactly the point at which I leave my vehicle at home. So that's really very interesting, yes. I'm just reminded of the fact that time is up, but I would like to engage in a final round. One last sentence, and looking toward the next bus-to-bus that will take place in 2 years, and what the situation of autonomous driving will be in the countryside. What will be the 2-3 top topics, I think, high up on the agenda? Well, in 2 years, we will still be facing the problem of scalability. 1,000 vehicles is not really a huge volume. I mean, we will really start speaking about bringing 50,000 vehicles on the road. I think that is really the main topic. Well, in 2 years, I think that the bus is predestined for this scenario. In cities and urban areas, we already have plannable journeys, but we also have a good scenario that they can also drive along the motorway. The e-bus or the bus is predestined for autonomous driving. I would say that in 2 installments of this fare, we will probably have that situation. Well, in 2026, around this time of the year, I don't believe that we will have made much headway. I think by the end of 2026, at the beginning of 2027, we will see the first type certifications. That's my prognosis. And then we will also see the first really autonomous traffic on the road. So I would say at the end of 2026. Okay, Tamy, please.
I also think that years for autonomous is a really short time, but I do see many cities that are trying to close central areas, and if they move fast enough, there might be an opportunity to see a couple operations going on if we are lucky to have them launch in these areas soon.
Super.
Ich hoffe sehr, dass wir in 2 Jahren nicht mehr darüber sprechen.
Well, I hope that in 2 years we will no longer be talking about whether it comes, but how quickly the rollout can be done. I think the key will be the production of 6-meter buses. Well, I do hope that you will also be joining us in 2 years' time again.